everyone, and welcome to our roundtable today. My name is Laura Cepeda, and I'm the managing editor for E3 magazine. I'm coming to you live today from Salzburg, Austria. And as you can see, we're having a bit of a dark and stormy day. However, our dispositions remain sunny. So in our recording studio today, we are discussing the topic of integration platforms for SAP users and the opportunities these platforms offer for the next generation of ERP. So I would love to briefly introduce our guests. First, we have Donna Mathew, who is the AI and SAP Alliance Manager from Boomi. Then we have René Haag, who is the Vice President of Sales for Syniti, which was recently acquired by Capgemini. And then we have Wright, who is the Director and Principal Consultant for the Xentian Group. So I know our viewers would love it if you could all go a bit more in depth in your introductions. Maybe you could talk about your companies, your positions within the companies, and maybe this relationship the company has with the SAP community. And if it's all right with you, Donna, we would begin with you.
You bet. Just so you know, Laura, I have a little trouble hearing you, so if I ask you to repeat, I can't get the volume correct. Hello, everybody. I'm Donna Mathews, and I lead the AI and SAP ecosystems at Boomi. And I'm in the technology alliances space. I'm not in the sales space, so I represent our product. I've got over 15 years working with SAP, not inside SAP, but implementing SAP systems, standing up entire new global rollouts, everything from R3 upgrades to you name it. I'm sure I just gave away my age by saying R3 to ECC upgrades, but there you go. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you very much, Donna, for your introduction. René, would you mind going next?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. My name is René. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Go-to-Market for the MEE region, which is Middle and Eastern Europe here at Syniti, which is now part of the Capgemini Group. We at Syniti doing data migration, data management, data integration for almost more than 20 years. In the meanwhile, I personally working in the space in the SAP ecosystem also since more or less 20 years, several roles, mainly sales driven, also have a bit of a history in the consulting space. So what we're doing as Syniti is we support our clients to really manage the data from the end-to-end perspective, which includes, of course, the integrational part, right? But we as an SAP partner, as well as the so-called solution extension partner, focusing really to help our clients to improve the data, but also to transform the business. And as I said, integration is one of the key parts. And I'm happy to be here today and have a conversation with my colleagues and with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, René. And finally, Roy, could you do yours?
Hello. So I'm Roy Wright. I'm a director and principal consultant at Xentian Group. And although we are actually a business partner of Boomi, we are a fiercely independent consultancy aimed at providing integration technology solutions and consultancy for a range of systems, so not just SAP, but any other number of integration scenarios. So a lot of experience in that market, and very keen on the introducing circular economy solutions for sustainable projects.
Well, thank you so much, guys. We love that you're here today with us. And we'd like to discuss a few questions on the topic of integration platforms. And we encourage you to ask each other questions, comments, and perhaps even disagree, as I'm perfectly willing to mediate as well as moderate the session. So let's begin with the first question, and that's for you, Donna. How would you define an IT platform, and what would the advantages be for ERP users?
That's a very broad question, but a cool one. So from my point of view, there are many, many IT platforms. Everything that helps you, any digital platform that you can think of, whether it be integration, whether it be a data platform, say like Databricks or Snowflake. So there are many different flavors of IT platforms. I think for ERP customers, what's important is where outside their ecosystem they need to connect to these IT platforms, and how do they connect, right? Especially when you're talking about SAP and the migration that everybody's going through, they're going to be looking at what are the best solutions end to end for them to be able to take advantage of the digital marketplace that we're in today.
Thank you so much for your answer, Donna. So my next question goes to René, and I'd like to ask you what type of platforms are available and what experience you have with platforms in the IT scene, and specifically in the SAP community.
Whoa. What type? So yeah, as Donna already said, right, there are many platforms available. So there are the integration platforms, the transformation platforms, the data platforms itself, right? But I think what is also important is the fact, okay, what finally is the platform really, the purpose of a platform, right? Because the platform brings, of course, the advantage that many different, let's say, views or functionalities together really combined into one platform instead of have several, let's call it tools, right? So from the platform perspective, and I think we talk about this in more detail in the future, right now in this call today on this roundtable, is really that the platform gives the customer also the ability, and I think that's one of the approaches anyhow for the whole industries we are working with, is getting back more into a standardized approach, right? Because using tools or platforms every like you want to use is great, but the platforms gives us the ability and our clients the ability to really standardize things, right? And make life again simpler, because if we talk about data, we have a huge number of data, we have different sources and all the stuff. So for me, the platform and the available platforms we all have over the place in the SAP ecosystem is really with the purpose to going back more into standardized approach, because the communication between the platforms, as Donna said or stated, right, is also very important.
Thank you for your answer, René. I'd like to continue with you, because I know that Syniti's position is that there's been a fundamental mistake focusing first on the technology rather than on the data. And since we're discussing data migration from one ERP silo into another, it would be great if you could speak more on the subject and using the slide that you provided.
Happy to. So if we can bring up the slide, that's how Syniti is doing it almost now for a couple of years, but also how we in the meanwhile take our go-to-market, right? We call it data first. And data first, what that finally means, and there are several ways how you can view on data first, but what is the aim and what is the reason why we take this approach in the different activities we are doing with SAP and our SAP clients is the fact that we need to shift back the focus on data. So what this finally means, and let's try to be as crisp and as brief as possible. We always in the past, and many of our clients in the past, build new business processes, and we do a lot of new things, new technologies. We considered, that would be great for me. That would be a fit for my business, which I would need, right? So taking the decision on these kind of new technologies, new approaches. And as soon as this decision is done, then by surprise, of course, the data needs to get into this new solution, right? So the approach is always, okay, take the solution. I know it's the best one I can use. And then as soon as I've made the decision, then I figure out, okay, does my data really fit? Does all the requirements I have from the data perspective really support this new business solution? Or might be something that I totally at the end of the day, not really make a mistake in the decision, but the decision is not 100% informed because, and that's what we are saying and want to say with need to focus back on the data is consult your existing data as well before you make decisions on new technology. So really not bringing the data into the technology because that can give a lot of disruptions, just taking migrations and go live that might be late or go live that extend the budget. It's all coming back to the fact that the data not necessarily is prepared for the new solution. And therefore, we are saying that we need to bring back the focus on the data, understand the data as part of the decision-making process already, right? But then also moving forward, if we then implement the new solution, whatever it is, still keep an eye on our data and making sure that we not bring the data into the technology so that the technology fits also into the data. That's the approach we are looking for, and that's why we are saying we need to focus more back on the data.
Thank you very much for your answer, René. So I aim my next question at Roy. So SAP has two platforms, the BTP, Business Technology Platform, and the BDC, the Business Data Cloud. Are these sufficient, or are there alternatives for successful ERP implementation?
Well, I think first of all we have to take a step back and look at why do we even have these solutions. Clearly, we're trying to confront business needs, and part of those business needs is about intercommunication. So if we look at BTP, and we're looking at a comprehensive platform solution that covers everything from developing apps to integrate with S4HANA, we're looking at a wide-ranging scope of technology that can produce solutions fit for the modern world. So one of the issues from obviously a legacy of SAP is that integration may be, in many scenarios, quite traditional. So you might have EDI solutions. Now, EDI was the first I agree with René here, EDI was the first cohesive approach to technology to produce integration into not only SAP, but other ERP systems. And we've largely seen an evolution from those traditional transaction-based systems into much more dynamic methods of collaboration. And that's important because collaboration is fundamental to the current dynamic within business evolution. Just as we've seen strategies such as the EU Green Deal requiring much greater insight into those metrics associated with carbon usage and basically sustainability-based attributes, we need to have a much wider view of collaboration in our supply chains, as an example. And that's where you need solutions like BTP and, of course, solutions like Boomi. It's not just focusing on one solution group. In order to be able to get full insight into our supply chains, whether it's the first-tier supply chains, second-tier supply chain and partners, and especially when we start thinking about things like Scope 3 emissions and the necessity for IoT, there's a much more comprehensive requirement for integration with not only SAP, but other disparate systems and traditional systems that may not be completely up to date. So, whereas we can focus on specific technologies, I quite agree with René here, we need solutions that actually put the data access and collaborative data sets at the forefront. And I think you mentioned Snowflake later. I think it might have been Donna mentioned Snowflake later. So if you're looking at solutions that can bring collaborative data together, and obviously you then have BI tools on top of that, gives greater insight. So whilst SAP obviously solutions have a clear role to play, there is a much wider context for these solutions and a clear business requirement for collaborative data use now and moving into the future.
Thank you so much.
Laura, is it okay if I jump on the back of that?
Oh, yeah, of course. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah. So the guys have made great points and really, really bring Boomi to the forefront here. And the question is that I get asked every day, why do I need Boomi when I've got Integration Suite or vice versa? And, great questions. Boomi is there to do all the collaboration that Roy's talking about, but it's there to be able to collaborate because it can move your data, right? And that's the part that René was talking about. We need to be able to consider the data first because that's what's going to drive our business, and what drives our business today, and it's going to continue to drive our business. And so the Boomi platform, and we're going back to platforms again, the Boomi platform concept is everything from EDI to API management to data management, and then, of course, just data transfer back and forth all over your landscape. And it's agnostic. It doesn't matter if SAP is the endpoint or if Salesforce is the endpoint, or both of them at the same time. So I think it's a really good definition of what a platform is today, and it gives users choices. Okay, it's not a platform that says you have to do it this way, it's our way, or no other way. We give users choices, and I think that's the big thing. People are smarter now when it comes to their environments. If we think back even 8-9 years ago, most of the SAP customers were SAP, what we called SAP wall-to-wall customers, right? They didn't really have anything else in their ecosystem. It's only been about 9 years, and now we're looking at Snowflake and Workday and God knows what else. I mean, there's just loads and loads of best-of-breed products that customers should have the ability to use if they want to. And they should have one easy way to get there.
Thank you so much for that, Donna. I just want to, oh, sorry.
And yeah, sorry, maybe I just also can add then also something on this topic, because especially the BDC, which is quite new as a topic, just released, I think in February, was from SAP, right? So just fully copy what also Donna said. The integration and the availability of data is one of the dimensions which you need to take care of in regards of data, right? Because if we moving forward into the whole development of our business and the customer businesses, right? And just take AI as the next big thing coming up, right? AI will not only, be fed in the large learning models by SAP or by Salesforce or whatever it is, right? To AI really enable to give the right support and the right answers to the clients at the end of the day, they need to have access to all the data. And because the advantage for AI compared to, us human beings is they can use all the data. They can understand all the data. They can work with this data. And therefore, it's even more important that we get this data together, that we get the integration between the systems. And coming back to the point where I just want to give a quick view on BDC. The big challenge in the past and still is the fact that data availability is one point, as I said, one dimension. But the other dimension is certainly understanding data, because if we say, okay, we get data from the left to the right and we get from SAP to non-SAP, they are finally different, right? So even if you consider taking an Oracle customer, it has a different naming like the SAP customer from the database structure, right? So the understanding and how we then can really combine and bring the data together, that's my personal finding. That's something which I really like and looking forward on the BDC, is this whole semantic layer where we try to not only bring the data together, but also then get the data on the same, let's say, technical level, so that we and every other application can start understanding the data. It doesn't matter from which source it's coming, right? So we are just really in the very early steps, and we talk data since 50 years finally, to be honest, right? But now we are on a stage where we say now the data has really become the importance and also the need for the clients to work with the data, that we need solutions to get this data together, but also solutions to make sure that the data, at least, let's say, the applications can understand all the different data. Sorry for my English on that, but that's what I want to bring on the BDC topic.
Could I just add to that? Laura? So I think René's entirely correct. I think it's also important to note, though, I referred to it earlier, EDI. So we tend to think of EDI as kind of an out-of-date technology, even though, in fact, the vast majority of B2B trade is enacted via traditional EDI technologies. Now, the point about EDI is it does have a semantic architecture to it because of the necessity. So if you think of something like EDIFACT standards as an example, it has a necessity to standardize on data transactions during the exchange process so that everybody knows what they're talking about. Now, a lot of those architectures actually can be brought forward into a more modern technology structure, we have problems sometimes purely with the technical layers. So as an example, if we talk about JSON, as a perfect example of passing data between trading partners, one of the problems with it is simply standardization. So that's also akin to API as a modern transfer mechanism and access mechanism. How do you then standardize APIs that may be being published by 10, 20, 30 different partners? So some of the technology is taking us forward, but there is always these, so we say, the grounding in where IT really came from, sort of as almost a scientific approach of having a set of semantic architectures and almost ontology in order that you can construct good standardized methods of then collaborating on data sets. And this, in fact, is going to become even more important as we move into the future, because whereas the past has been typified by transactional data, passing from one to another, we need to start moving into data that is purely in an external context. So trusted bodies. So we talk about blockchain, things like that, being able to put data into blockchain, which is not just the domain of a single trading partner. And a lot of that is going to come down to commercial confidentiality. You want to share collaborative data, but at the same time, it has a commercial impact. And that's especially true within things like the EU Green Deal, where you want to share certain sets of data, but equally protect some of the confidentiality of that data. So there are issues from beginning to end in terms of setting up standards and in the availability that have to be addressed here.
Okay, thank you so much for discussing that. Since we've talked about some of the issues, I'd like to go a bit further with that same subject. And I'd like to ask Donna if she could maybe talk about some of the challenges that come with using these platforms.
Certainly, Laura, there's always challenges, like the guys said, and mostly because trying to get systems to be able to talk to and then understand, right? It's one thing to be able to get data out from one place and deliver it somewhere else, but for it to be understood upon delivery. So there's a lot of transformation that has to happen. You have to understand the data that's coming out, and that you have to have the ability to reformat or transform that data into another type of data for the receiving system, so it understands what it's getting and it allows you to bring it into its environment. And so this is where we're looking at standardization, but we're looking at to AI agents and agentic frameworks to help bring some of this, some of the technical components in the background. So if we could get all the data from your Oracle system, and from your SAP system, and from your homegrown on-prem databases, Boomi can do all that and put it in one place. And then it comes to, okay, how are we going to make sure we can understand all of that? I recently seen an AI agent that will determine your database type when it connects. It will determine your database type, and it will say, you speak like this, so I'm going to speak like this to get the data out. And we're going to see a lot more maturity here. But the guys mentioned, Roy, specifically APIs, right? We know what happened when APIs came on the scene. It was wonderful. Everybody's like, oh, I can now connect that to that, and I don't have to have a physical piece of hardware to do it. It's wonderful. Let's go build all these APIs. And people were out building APIs and didn't think about governing those APIs, right? What do we get? So we had a zoo with no cages, and lots of people out there building APIs. And then after there were several difficult periods, somebody thought, okay, let's get our arms around this. Let's figure this out. Let's govern this in some way. And then API management came along, and we now have API management platforms to do that governance and give the guardrails. Well, Boomi doesn't want to recreate those sins of the past that we all felt during the API launch and growth. So already Boomi is implementing guidance and governance around AI. So putting that in place first, so we have those guardrails and we don't just have the zoo animals running around, with no cages. So I think that's one of the things. We're using our history to make sure that we have learned from the past, from a technology standpoint. And now, as René said, there is all the information's out there. AI can use it and learn, but we also have to be able to put some guardrails around these technologies.
Thank you so much for your answer, Donna. My next question is for René. And I'd like to ask what practical experience or what did you experience while implementing these platforms in the ERP environment?
Plenty. And I think it doesn't matter that much which kind of platform you're finally implementing. Almost or very often, if I talk to clients and work with clients, they have the, let's say, expectation, okay, now I get a new fancy platform and all my problems are solved, right? And the reality is these platforms, of course, have a lot of, or many of them have a lot of automation, they have a lot of content. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities to support. But no platform and platform approach will work without any kind of methodology behind, which should be followed, right? And of course, the right level of governance, right? So if we talk about platforms, and again, it doesn't matter if it's now an integration platform or even it's our transformation platform, right? The key is the combination, from my perspective, the platform, the methodology, and the people, finally, who then also work and support our clients to make sure that we get out the success we all want to have and support really the business outcomes that our customer are looking for.
Thank you for your answer, René. I'd actually love to ask Roy the same question. What has been your experience utilizing or implementing these platforms in the ERP environment?
Yeah, I think I'll just extend to a certain extent what René just said, because I completely agree with the idea that you've got to have some governance model around the deployment of these platforms. And certainly when you're looking at what I would call the abstraction layer, or the middleware, where you would normally fit an application like Boomi, Integration Platform as a Service. Now, one of the things about a product like Boomi is it changes the way you actually develop solutions. So not only from a technical perspective, which obviously you're talking about a low-code, no-code environment, that ostensibly makes it much easier to implement these solutions. However, it also changes the way that you deploy code. So your procedures around DevOps have to change and evolve as well. So that actually has a huge impact, because it changes everything from simply versioning code and versioning solutions, which seems quite low level and you wouldn't necessarily think has an impact, but it can directly impact procedures around that kind of deployment issue, right up to how do you support it in the long term. Certainly, with looking at Boomi, again, I'm not trying to shill for Boomi because I'm obviously independent. However, the fact that you can deploy it locally as an atom makes it an ideal solution in-house. So you can obviously have, whether it's actually on-prem or your own, for instance, Azure servers, you can deploy Boomi. There are obviously other iPaaS solutions out there, such as Work2 and Celigo. They tend to be just cloud-based. There is a concept of an agent in one of them, but it's not really the same as a local deployment. So this kinds of solution, which can really lead you into the next phase of technical implementation that we need for the future, as we've talked about collaboration and the need to have these integration solutions, it actually changes the way you have to do things and the way you need to look at things. Some of those are really positive. Some of them there are certain negative aspects to it. However, it does mean you've got to go into it with your eyes open and, as René indicated, have a governance model that enables you to encounter these issues and deal with them in a way that's suitable for your company, for your regime, your internal structure, and which doesn't inhibit the ability to actually develop the kind of solutions, agile solutions, that you need going forwards.
Thank you so much for your answer, Roy. My next question goes to Donna. And I wanted to ask you how SAP users can find the ideal platform for their ERP architecture.
Again, I think the guys have kind of covered it. do your research, do your homework. And that's when I'm talking to SAP customers, I always ask, what are they looking at? What systems have they considered when they're looking at Boomi, and why they may be looking at Boomi? Or even before we have the Boomi conversation, when we're just talking about at a high level about customers who want to update their landscape. They're looking at their S4 migration. They're going to take this as an opportunity to maybe re-platform some other legacy technologies that they've had in their landscape for a long time. So what I always say is look at several, right? Whether it's an iPaaS to replace your middleware like web methods or so on an old enterprise service bus, look at the availability out there and the pros and cons of every system, because as Roy said, there are. Now, hopefully there's more pros than cons moving from middleware to iPaaS, but you still have to know what you're looking at. And there are some iPaaS, like Roy said, that are only cloud-based. That means if you are a customer and say you've chosen to go to S4 on-prem. Now, a lot of people don't even know that's an option, okay, but it is. You can migrate, so the whole migration's the same as far as the technicalities of it. It's just as complex, but you'd be migrating to an S4 system on-premise, and that is a choice you would make if, say, you are a government contractor or a local government or even a national government, and you want things on-prem. With a lot of the technologies, you can't, right? It's on the cloud or nothing. With SAP, they still will allow you to be on-prem, but you have to give up your right arm to let your left arm have what it wants, okay? So yes, you're on-prem, but you will not get any of the AI capabilities. They will not go to on-prem customers. You will get very little enhancement, because SAP don't really want you to be on-prem. They want everybody to go to the cloud, but there will always be customers that want that ability to maintain their data on-prem. So Boomi allows you, the only thing that happens in the cloud is your design time. So when you're building your integrations, that's on the Boomi cloud. But when it comes to the execution, the runtime, you can have that on-prem behind your firewall, or you can have a hybrid. You can have some of your landscape where you have to have your data on-prem, but others you'll be able to utilize the cloud. So you have one atom on-prem and one in the cloud. So again, it's about choice, giving you the choice to work in the way how you want to and be able to control your data and still be able to take advantage of things like AI, right? So you won't be able to use SAP's AI stuff, but you can certainly use Boomi's AI and other people's AI technologies, so you're not in a little box set to the side.
Mm-hmm. I just want to ask a follow-up question. There are other platform options in the open source sector. Do you know if any other offer on-prem or hybrid options? And if there are, what makes Boomi stand out when compared to those options?
I think we are the only ones that allow you to do hybrid, to have both on-prem and in the cloud, to have it wherever you want it. That is one of the differentiators. And something we haven't mentioned, we've all talked about the need to get data out and to get it into one place so we have a 360-degree view. That's exactly what we want to do. The issue around SAP is there's still a proprietary database there that is difficult to get data out and normally requires SAP developers to be in the integration process because they have to do the data extraction, okay? And right now, more than ever, with this once-in-a-generation change of platform, these developers are needed and under pressure more than ever. And there's less of them on the planet as there has ever been. People don't come out of university and go to SAP Academy anymore. They just don't, or very few. Used to be, come out of university, go to SAP Academy, I got a job for life. So these developers, one, there's less of them because developers have gone across multiple technologies. And two, they are strategic to a business. So to have them involved in every single data extract to construct every data extract, whether it's to stand up a new data and analytics platform or it's to support a line of business report or dashboard. You need SAP developers in the process. With Boomi, we are unique that we give you an option to be able to extract data from SAP at scale and to be able to do it in real time to support your APIs, your real-time event dashboards, or line of business reporting, or AI.
Thank you very much for your answer, Donna. My next question goes to Roy, and I wanted to ask you about how you help or assist your customers to find the right platform for them.
Well, I'll just reiterate that we are independent, so that gives us much greater scope to be able to refer to technologies that are fit for purpose for that particular scenario. It isn't always the case that the same solution is ideal for every single customer. So it also depends on whether a customer is small, relatively small, or whether they're larger. So if you've got a global corporate, clearly their interest is going to be quite different to a smaller customer. So we obviously have an approach where we obviously look at the technology, but also provide those consultancy services that enable people to get an independent view of what their solution should be, first of all, because we have the sort of breadth of experience across not just modern, but legacy technology, shall we say. So some people are still running systems happily on, I've even heard Barn mentioned, so old systems, relatively old system, right up to SAP systems that, shall we say, can be diverse in many ways because people have tweaked them, and you just get an IDOC output and there's a whole bunch of Z records in there, so nothing's necessarily standard anymore, right up to obviously the more modern implementations where people are trying to keep to the standards. And that kind of goes back to the point that René was making. Yes, you can have standards, but they tend to evolve and creep over time, and you tend to get this kind of obfuscation of what the standards really are anymore because people are doing things in a different way. So it's about leading people through at every level. So not just the consultancy, but also the technology as well, and within the scenario that they're trying to achieve. I mentioned earlier in the call, we're kind of focused on circular supply chain because that is the next big evolution. If we look at how the markets are evolving, and this is obviously a key point in terms of our consultancy, we look at how the markets are evolving with things like trade dynamics. Well, clearly that's in the news at the moment. You can't miss it. That has an impact. That has implications for the way businesses are going to evolve. EU legislation, we've got the EU Green Deal directives. That has an impact on the way businesses need to evolve. The point is, these tools aren't just there. I think it was René made the point. It's not just about having shiny technology. Oh, great. What's the next big thing? There are now pressing strategic initiatives that mean businesses have to evolve and have to start making choices about how they are going to go forward. And that can be things such as circular economy, where you're looking at how do we reduce virgin manufacturing? How do we actually start having returns, reclamation and refurbishment, and turn these aspects not only to cost centers, but into profit centers? So all of these questions now have a need for new technologies that give us agility and flexibility and actually also protect our core data services. And that's something that Donna obviously touched on. You want to be able to have a SAP system that isn't just full of, as I'd phrase it, Z records, hasn't just been an evolution into a customized version for you. You want to try and keep that as standardized as possible and use that abstraction layer, such as tools like iPads and Boomi obviously support, have that abstraction layer deal with the intricacies of interconnecting with these new data supply chains, digital supply chains that need to evolve because the business pressures and the geopolitical pressures are going to make these harsh realities within a very short period of time. We're already seeing it happen. And so that evolution requires tools that can give a broad scope of solution base and obviously meet those strategic needs.
Thank you so much for that. And we have to slowly start to wrap up our session. But before that, I wanted to ask if anyone had any final comments to make. No? In
Ladies
that
first,
case,
maybe, Donna?
Go ahead.
Oh, Sorry. I'm not sure if Donna wants to say something, but the final comment is for me, and with all the experience and all the conversations on data, right? Let's say it this way. All or many of our customers are afraid because of the last 20, 30, 40, whatever kind of years on data they're actually facing, and they need to understand how they get this into this new world. The answer is, of course, it's not simple, right? But for me, it's very important that nobody needs to be afraid of. It's just really, from my perspective, question with whom you are partnering, and finally also, how much you are, let's say, not willing, but how are you facing going back into the standard? Because at the end of the day, if we take a quick look at the successful business transformation at our client, right? After this transformation, and I just like to compare it with moving a house, right? We cleanse the garage, right? And the garage is now clean, it's open, the car can drive in, and that's the target. And as soon as this target is reached, we are really able, and our customers are really able to lever the data which is necessary, and not running around with these, 30 years old, 2 double garages on old data. And that should be a target of everyone moving forward who wants to transform the business.
Thank you so much for that, René. Donna, you had some final comments? No?
I was just going to say to the gentleman to thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation, René and Roy, and I hope that we can continue the conversation after today.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah,
there is something.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
There's just something I'd like to add. I think that we've obviously talked about SAP S4. We've talked about things like BTP, which is obviously quite a wide-ranging and inevitably relatively expensive solution set. For smaller companies, that's not necessarily within their scope, but these technologies are available to everyone. It is possible to have a thin end of the wedge and ramp up to these solutions so that people can actually learn how they're going to use these solutions in the most cost-efficient way. I think that's very important because people are faced with the need to evolve. However, it doesn't mean that you just need to have deep pockets to be able to survive that evolution. It is possible to ramp up slow and steady. And I think, as René mentioned, you've got to have the right partners to work with that can lead you along that in an efficient and friendly way in order to achieve your strategic sort of objectives.
Well, thank you so much for your comments, for being here, for being part of our first English Roundtable. I hope you had a great time. I know I did, and we hope to see you again on a future occasion.